there's one thing we can all be certain of is that one day we're all going to need a funeral. We just don't know when. Planning with a pre-need family service counselor like Diana Uyematsu can help you take control of the unexpected. Since 1986, Diana has been representing Mililani Memorial Park, assisting hundreds of families to help protect their loved ones from the difficult decisions and financial pressures that an unplanned funeral can bring. She will help you sort out all the essential arrangements and protect you from rising funeral costs so it doesn't become a financial burden for your loved ones. Be prepared. Have peace of mind. Call Diana Uyematsu today at 808-479-8325.
Welcome to the Legal Advice in Paradise podcast, brought to you by www.legaladviceinparadise.com. Even in one of the most beautiful places in the world, life can be litigious. On this podcast, the best and brightest legal minds gather to help you navigate your way through every legal question you may face. This program will help you know your rights, know what steps to take, and help you find the best legal representation, all in simple, easy to understand terms. And now, here's your host, Justine Gronwald.
Aloha, Agents of Change. This is Justine with Legal Advice in Paradise. And today I have the honor of having Scott Makuakane as our guest today. He's an attorney that specializes in estate planning and other areas, but today we're going to concentrate on estate planning. So I want to introduce Scott to you and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Aloha. Thank you for having me on your show.
Sure.
A little bit about myself. I grew up on the Big Island, graduated from Ka'u High School. Went to the mainland for college, came back, got married, went to law school, and been practicing here ever since. So I've been practicing since 1983.
Okay. And this area of law?
Specifically.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what we want to do, as we do with all of our shows, is that we're going to ask Scott the basics, like who needs estate planning, why they need it, and when they come and see him, what exactly does he need from you? So let's start about who needs it and why. Estate planning.
The only people who need estate planning are people who are either going to become incapacitated someday or die someday. Nobody else needs it, really.
Oh, okay.
That's pretty much all of us.
Okay. That's a good way of putting it.
And you know, what I'm getting at is that there will come times in our lives, and maybe when we're gone, when we're going to need other people to help make decisions, whether it's for our medical care, whether it's for our stuff, you know, the things that we own, whether it's just taking care of things and making decisions for our family members. But estate planning is really the process of coming up with kind of a rule book about, you know, who's going to take charge. If I'm not in charge anymore, who is? Who's going to step in, and who's going to make decisions for me? Who's going to make decisions for my family?
And today the aging population is growing by leaps and bounds because people are living longer. However, sometimes, you know, till the end of our lives, we don't have the capacity to make these decisions. So you have to lay the groundwork.
Yeah, and you know, people kind of assume that estate planning is a thing for old people.
Yeah, I was going to tell you, there's this thing people think about, like, we don't need it, you know.
You know, there's a whole bunch of famous cases that deal with advanced health care directives. Karen Ann Quinlan, Nancy Cruzan, what's the more recent one? The lady from Florida.
I'm not familiar.
It's on the tip of my tongue. But my point is that in each of those cases, they involved young women who were either in a car accident, or one of them had an eating disorder. Terry Schiavo is the one. She had an eating disorder, and she, you know, was unconscious. Her husband found her unresponsive, called 911, got her going again. But her case, you know, made law sort of nationwide, and certainly it focused attention on the need to have directives in place so that if you can't tell your doctor, I want this care or I don't want that care, and in that case the question was, should they keep her on life support?
Let me ask you, how old was she?
She was in her early 20s.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's college age.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Karen Ann Quinlan was in college.
Oh, Okay.
Nancy Cruzan was a little bit older, but still, a very young lady.
Not the age that we think that we need to plan anything, that's for sure.
That's right. That's right. And so when somebody asks me, so when should I call you,
Yeah,
Scott?
when?
I tell them, just wait till about 6 months before you become incapacitated or you die. And of course they say, oh, okay, I get it. Because, we don't know when those things are going to happen.
Yeah.
And that's the point of planning. You just be ready.
And that's the theme of our show is it's not a matter of if, but it's a matter of when you're going to need legal help and guidance. So this fits perfectly in preparation. So when someone comes to you, say they make that decision, what exactly do you need from them to get it started?
Yeah, in order to sit down and really have a productive relationship with an estate planning attorney, there's a couple of things you ought to do. One of them is you ought to be kind of familiar with what's out there in terms of just estate planning opportunities and the kinds of documents and the kind of strategies that you may need to avail yourself of. And there's a lot of ways to learn about those. You can look on the internet. You can go to workshops. A lot of lawyers offer workshops. We do. And in fact, when someone calls us and wants to sit down and do estate planning, the first thing we do is we like to start them off in a workshop, because
that's a good idea.
That way they have a certain knowledge base that they can build on and coming up with their own estate plan. So you need to have that basic information. Okay. You need to think through who you would want to have making decisions for you, so that the kinds of decision makers may be different. The person that you would want managing your stuff may be different from the person that you would want to have making medical treatment decisions, for example. Right. The person that you would want to have raising your kids may be different from the one that you would want to have in charge of managing your assets.
So it's multifaceted. It's not just so there's many things that you have to take into the consideration. Think about the people you have in mind, and of course you would have to ask them, right?
Well, ideally, you don't want to surprise people with that kind of thing.
I know. Have you ever had
guess what? You have 2 more kids.
Have you ever had that case where someone was assigned, I guess it's called a beneficiary or whatever their capacity is, that it's a surprise to them?
Yeah, actually it happens a lot.
And you don't want that.
You don't want surprises.
But it happens a lot.
It happens.
Okay, so that's one of the rules, is at least discuss it with these people first.
Good idea.
Yeah.
That's what I would suggest, yeah.
So tell us more about the workshop. What do you cover in there, and how long is it, and how often?
Well, when I do a basic estate planning workshop, it's 2 hours.
Okay.
We have a couple of them every month, and we try to vary the times. We usually do it on Wednesdays. So we'll have one in the morning, one in the afternoon. And in 2 hours, we talk about a whole lot more than most people can absorb, frankly. But at least they have a very good grasp on the sort of the breadth of estate planning and the kinds of issues that they need to be aware of and armed to deal with when they sit down and actually come up with their own estate plan.
And one of the highlights, as far as preventative, having an estate, planning for this, what does it protect you from, or what are the things that people don't know about when they become how do you say
incapacitated?
Incapacitated, or they pass away. I mean, what are the things people don't know about when this happens?
Great question. Well, a lot of times, people have really clear ideas about who they would want to have in charge, right? But if you don't plan ahead, and if you don't have the right measures in place, you don't know who's going to be in charge. That's one problem. And if your estate has to go through a conservatorship proceeding where you become incapacitated and you haven't taken steps to name who would be basically in charge of your stuff or in charge of your health care, that whole process has to go through the courts. And so it takes control away from the people that you would want to have the control, and it puts it in the hands of the lawyers and the judge and the people. Probably they're really good folks and like that, but just the time and expense and aggravation involved in going to court can be avoided through good planning.
Okay.
So one of the kinds of things you want to do is just simplify your family's life and your own life by avoiding those situations where control is taken away. So keeping control where you want it is one of the goals of estate planning.
And say somebody, we're talking about probably people who own a lot of assets, like homes and other valuables. What about those that really don't have anything to pass on or really don't own anything. What do you say to...
Well, I think most people feel that way. Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I don't really
Right.
have that much.
Right.
But whatever you own is whatever you own. And if it makes absolutely no difference to you what happens to it, okay, fine, you don't have to do anything. But for most of us, even, what we do have, it will make a difference. Do I want it to go to my spouse? Do I want it to go to my kids? Do I want it to go to my, relatives? Do I want it to go to charity? We all sort of have preferences as to, what's going to happen with all those things.
And what is the most common age that you see coming to you when it comes to... Because obviously we're saying it doesn't matter, it's never too early, but what's the average age that you see coming to you as your client wanting to do this?
I would say most of my clients are approaching retirement years, if not already in retirement. Most people people have sort of different approaches to life. Some people are planners, some people aren't.
Fly by the seat of your pants?
Yeah. and really, you get much better results if you do plan ahead. And it's really important to understand, too, it's not just planning ahead, but it's keeping your plan current. Because things are going to change. Guarantee, things are going to change. So you can have a perfect estate plan today. Is it going to be so great 10 years from now? Probably not. Because your health is going to change, your assets are going to change, your family situation is going to change, the list of people that you like and trust and would want to have making decisions for you is going to change. So you need to make sure that your estate plan takes those changes into account. And what I suggest is that people sit down at least once a year, go through their estate plan, and just make sure it still says what they want it to say, make sure their assets are all still properly titled.
Or anything major that comes up, right?
Well,
anytime.
Yeah. Somebody gets married, somebody gets divorced, somebody has a kid. Yeah, all of those are times to think about your estate plan.
Yeah, and when these people come to you, because I always say, people are kind of intimidated going to attorneys in the first place. How do you, make them at ease? Because you're talking, we're seeing the looming ahead that they're not going to be here anymore.
Well, yeah, but I think most people can appreciate the fact that there will come a day when they die. We all know that. It's not a mystery. It's not a secret.
Right.
We're all going to die. One thing that I think maybe a lot of people don't appreciate is that a lot of us are going to be incapacitated for some period of time before we die. And part of that is because, thank God, we have all of these advances in medical science that keep our lungs going and keep our hearts going. But they can't keep our brains going to keep up with the rest of us. At least they haven't figured out how to do that yet. And so although we live longer, a growing number of us are going to be incapacitated for some period of time before we die. So we really need to plan for that. And when I say a growing number, I'm talking between 60 and 70% of us.
That's a lot.
It's a very high percentage.
Yeah. And people what's the average age that you're seeing that people survive? Because I was talking to our friend Sheen. He's, they've got clients that are like 100, 90 in that area. Is that like the going average
life expectancy is going up. Yeah.
And whenever somebody sits with you, I wonder if there becomes like they probably bring some people with them, right? When
it depends.
And what if there's kind of like a disagreement? Like do you become the unbiased referee, or I'm pretty sure you see some type of this.
That can happen.
Yeah?
That can happen. And so it's really ideal if you know that there's conflict within the family to deal with it as soon as possible. I have clients come and say, I just want to make sure there's no fights after I'm gone.
Yeah, that's what we see a lot of.
But all I can tell them is, well, if your kids get along now, they're probably going to get along later. If they don't get along now, they're not going to get along any better when you're gone. So, yeah. So it's good to deal with those conflicts now. And it's also good to appreciate the fact that, very often the conflicts aren't over the estate plan. The conflicts have to do with things that may have happened decades ago.
Yeah, people tend to hold things like that.
That's right.
And I've heard a lot of horror stories from just in general, but people that I know that, here's one thing. When there's a bunch of siblings and say, the parent is not able to care for themselves, sometimes it's one person who has all the brunt of responsibility. The person that's there for the parent, feeding them or, helping if they don't have any outside help. And then as soon as that person is gone, everybody comes out of the woodwork wanting something, but they were never there when that person was alive and needed care. That's when the estate planning comes in handy, or does that help in any way by having estate planning?
Well, it can.
Yeah.
But see, the thing about situations like that is a lot of times you'll find that when you have these competing factions, they'll each be wanting to take mom or dad in to see their own lawyer, and they're, so there's sort of
why don't we address that? I mean, okay, say someone is taking care of that parent, and then the rest of the siblings say, oh, we don't have time, we don't have the finances, or however they can't contribute. But all of a sudden, like you said, they come into the picture knowing that, hey, there's a lot at stake here, but I'm going to have my attorney involved. How does that play out? Say that person has an estate planning in place. One of the siblings brings in an attorney. Where do you come in, or how does that work?
Yeah, well, that's an area where attorneys have to be really careful, and they have to tread very carefully, because there are a lot of things that can invalidate an estate plan. So in other words, if an individual just is unable to come up with their own estate plan, it's not really mom's estate plan, it's daughter's estate plan, and daughter is telling lawyer, what to build into the estate plan. Lawyer has to be professional enough to understand that, wait a minute, what I need to be doing is carrying out the client's wishes,
Right.
as opposed to carrying out someone else's wishes. So the lawyer needs to be really clear as to what the relationship is in terms of the attorney and the client. And if I'm drawing documents for you, you're my client.
Right.
It's not somebody else who's telling me, oh, this is what Justine really wants in her documents. You're the client. And so it's important for the professionals involved just to appreciate that, first of all, the person signing the documents has to be competent to do it on their own. They have to be acting free of undue influence. In other words, somebody isn't coming in and saying and imposing their will on the person.
Is
and
that
getting
called
them,
duress?
It can be.
Can be?
Duress is a little bit different. Duress is sort of someone has a gun to your head.
Okay, that's
They're saying,
it.
you signed this or else.
But what if you come across where this person, daughter or son of this ailing person who's not in their right mind, goes to the hospital, makes them sign something, and they're not, and no one's around, and just has them sign.
Yeah, it can be a
know?
problem. It can be just a question of he said,
Do you
she
need
said.
a notary for that? Just is it?
Well, ideally, most estate planning documents would be notarized. But having the notary simply means that you've had someone come in and can verify that that's the person who signed this document.
But it doesn't mean that they're in their right mind.
It doesn't, because that's not really the notary's job. The notary's job
okay.
isn't to read everything and ask the person, do you understand it? I'm not saying that no notary ever does that.
Right.
But that's not really the notary's function. The notary's function is to make sure that the person signing this document is that person with the pen who's putting their signature on the document.
But having a notary, does it make the document any stronger?
Well, it gets around the problem of proving who signed the document.
Okay.
So
Okay.
if the person is gone, yeah, it's much better to have a notary, rather than someone else testifying, well, I recognize that signature and that's the person who's passed away.
So anything else we need to know about estate planning, like, I don't know, in your workshop, what are the highlights that you cover in the 2 hours?
Well, we cover, among other things, just the different estate planning tools. And it's important to understand, there's wills, there's trusts,
Right.
and there's different kinds of trusts even. And not everybody needs everything, right? So if you think about the estate planning strategies as tools, it's a matter of just making sure you've got all the right tools in your toolbox and you're using them in the right way to accomplish the things that you want to accomplish.
I see.
So the main thing is, if you can have a really clear idea of what you want to accomplish, your estate planning attorney can pull the right tool out and can help you use that tool.
I see. Okay. Well, if there's anything else you need us to know when somebody comes and sits with you, I know I went on your website and there's a personal information form that's 8 pages long. It's very detailed. So what I'm guessing is that you should have as much of this filled out as possible. Don't leave any stone unturned, because if you leave something out, it's hard to add it later or when you're gone.
No, not necessarily, but it is important to get the full picture. So when I sit down with clients, I really want to know about their families. I really want to know about relationships.
Dynamics.
Because that's going to help come up with the right kind of estate plan. I really want to know, well, are all your kids really able to handle assets? If you leave something to this person, are they still going to have it a year later? Or do you need to put in protective provisions to make sure that they're not going to be able to go blow it?
Right.
Because some kids, they don't have the best of friends or the best of just ability to hold on to assets. So it's important to assess those kind of things and build the right measures into the estate plan. So having a good idea of the family, the dynamics, having a really good idea of the assets really helps to figure out what kind of measures to put in place in terms of the estate plan.
Yeah. Okay, so it's worth investing the time, and
I think it really is, because I've dealt with estates that were just a mess because nothing was done, and I've dealt with estates that were very well prepared, and the second is a way better way to go.
Okay, let me ask you, aside from what you do on the legal side, are there other services outside that have to be involved? Like, I know financial planners. Are there any outside services that you work together with in concert to get this all done, aside from financial planners? And what do financial planners do?
Well, financial planners a lot of times are the people who are helping people pick their investments, decide on what kind of retirement plans they should have, and those kind of things. And the retirement plans and the life insurance and the investments all come into play in the estate plan.
Right.
And with some assets, like a life insurance policy, you wouldn't necessarily put a life insurance policy into your revocable living trust, but you may name your trust as the beneficiary of that policy. So with something like a life insurance policy or a retirement plan, it's a matter of sort of figuring out your beneficiary designations. With other assets, with your stock account, let's say, or your bank account, the question is, well, should I have that in my trust or not? And most of the time the answer is, yeah,
Yes.
you probably should
wanna
have it in
everything.
your trust.
And aside from financial planners, are there, like, my friend Sheen Doman, what he does that come into play as well?
Well, sure. Sheen is basically an administrator. He serves as a trustee through his company, CSI, Comfort, Security, and Independence. And probably the most important decision that you make in your whole estate plan is, well, who is going to be making decisions for me, and who's going to be making decisions for my stuff when it comes time that I'm not able to do it myself. And so picking the right trustee is going to be really important. And sometimes people, frankly, don't have someone, really close.
Right.
They don't have family members, they don't have friends, either that they feel close enough to or that they trust enough.
That's the main thing, the trust.
That's it. And so sometimes you have to look outside the family to professionals to be able to manage your stuff if it comes time that you're not able.
Now, how often do you find that a service like that comes into play? Is that majority of the time, or is that like an exception?
Well, it's not a huge exception, but I would say probably more on the order of about 10% of the time. Because most of the time, people want to be their own trustees, and they have a really clear idea about who the first and second successor should be. But not everybody does. So it just really depends on your family situation and what kind of friends and what kind of people are close to you.
Okay. So I think the biggest takeaway, agents of change, is that always be prepared. We never know. We're all going to go sometime. And
Sorry.
Really, and really, what we want to do, it sounds like, is that we don't want to leave the burden to someone else, or
it's not just the burden. It's also, if I become incapacitated, I want to make sure I'm taken care of.
Okay,
and I
yes,
want to make sure my
yeah.
family's taken care of.
Yeah.
And so I want to make sure the right person is going to be there to do that.
Okay. So that's the clarification right there. We're going to end this right now and come back in another episode, because Scott's going to address elder law in more detail. So until then, we want to say aloha. We're going to shaka out here, as we always do.
Ahui ho.
And we see you soon.